Good afternoon. I said to Andrew I'd put a little slideshow together on the thermodynamics of heat pumps, just for basic principles, um, and in relation to the second law of thermodynamics. Um, so basically there are two statements under the second law that govern heat pumps and refrigeration. One of them is the Kelvin-Planck statement. Basically it says it's impossible to construct a device that will operate in a cycle and produce no other effect than raising of a weight and the exchange of heat with a single reservoir. So in other words, what he's saying basically is you can't take heat out of one source without rejecting it into another one. The second statement is the one more relevant to heat pumps, and it is the Clausian statement. And again it states it is impossible to construct a device that will operate in the cycle and produce no effect other than the transfer of heat from a cooler body to a hotter body. So in other words, you can't get heat to flow up a hill, so you have to do work on it. So what you basically have is a heat sink, which is T1 at T1. Sorry, that's a heat source, I beg your pardon. A heat source at T1 and a heat sink at T2. So you take a quantity of heat Q1 out of T1, do amount of work on it, and reject it into T2, and you get Q, which is the amount of heat you took out down here, plus the amount of work that you did on the fluid or the vapor. So I've taken steam as a typical fluid. It's the easiest to understand, but all liquids that go into vapor phase are basically the same. I'll use this just to explain the principle. So basically I have the saturation line for water at different temperatures, and these are constant pressure lines. So let's say at 1 bar, that should read 1 bar there. So here we have our heat source T1 and our heat sink at T2, and to explain this I just say this is at 1 bar and 100 degrees centigrade. So we keep adding heat, making it into steam. The quality of the steam improves until we get to complete dry steam. We then continue to add heat to it, so the temperature will now start to rise as well as the energy, and we'll keep going up on that constant line CD. But let's say when we get to this point here that we compress the steam using a Roots blower or some other centrifugal blower, and we arrive up here at say 4 bar after doing amount of work W. We now have steam at 140 degrees centigrade, so we can reject that steam or the heat out of that steam, and we can follow this line all the way back down until we hit the air complete, and then we start to take the latent heat out of it again until we arrive back at point B. Now we've added an amount of heat Q1, which is this here, taken from the source, and we reject it at T2 at the sink at 140. Well, it's not all rejected at 140, because when we hit that point there, the temperature would start to drop as well. But for the sake of this argument, I've just taken it that it is all the same temperature. So one measure of performance of a heat pump is the coefficient of performance. Now there's a lot of different measurements. There's the energy efficiency ratio and other measurements where they take the parasitic loads of the fans and other things into account. But basically the coefficient of performance is the energy out divided by the work done, or in order to get that energy. So basically here we have The coefficient of performance is Q1, the amount of heat that we added, plus the work, divided by the work that we have done in order to get that heat. So typical COP is of the order of 3 to 5, can be as low as 2, can be as low as 1 depending on, but a typical order would be 3 to 5. And if we move along now to more realistic fluid that's used in refrigeration, which is ammonia or R717, there are lots of 407C, 107. Anyway, they all follow the basic principle. So if we follow the yellow or the blue lines here, we start with a liquid and we start to evaporate it, adding heat at constant pressure. We then compress it using a compressor. Can be with ammonia, it can be a reciprocating compressor, it can be a screw, can be a centrifugal, and we arrive up at point 2, which for ammonia, if we increase the pressure from 15 bar up to 40 bar, we increase the temperature from 40 degrees centigrade up to 120 degrees centigrade. So it gives us a big delta T in order to get rid of that heat. So we can now start injecting the heat at 2, and we arrive over at point 3, where we're back to a liquid, but we're at the higher pressure. So what it's done then, it put through an expansion valve, and because there's no work done on it, the energy in it has to be the same. So you arrive back at this point here, which is a bit of liquid, and then you add more energy to it and bring it back up to there. This here is pumped back up to this point over here because it's a liquid. So you've now completed the cycle, which is basically that, and you've taken the heat out up here and rejected it down here. So that's the basic. All heat pumps work basically on the same cycle. There are different fluids, as I said, and there's different types of compressors, but they all obey the same principles. Anyway, I hope that makes it a bit clearer.